If you're not able to speak fluent English, then it would be really difficult for you to survive here. Students would take that as a sad news today, but it would save them another year or two of struggle and then getting the same news that they are not able to qualify for Canadian PR 2 years later. By announcing these changes, some of the scams will also come to a rest. I think paying $300 to take an IELTS exam is much better than paying $20,000 to $30,000 illegally for getting an LMIA. So there is a common expression called ripping the bandage, ensuring that the creme de la creme of Indian immigrants stay back. We will be able to rebuild some of the negative reputation impact that the Indian immigrant community has taken in Canada. Hi Cainds, welcome back to our channel Be Kind. My name is Shrey, and in this video we'll talk about the recent changes announced by the Immigration Minister of Canada, Marc Miller, in relation to the temporary foreign workers that are currently living in Canada and what it could mean for the near future.
The Liberals are again cutting the number of study permits Canada gives out to international students. Today, Immigration Minister Marc Miller announced the cap will go down by 10% next year, and it will stay at that number for 2026. There are also new restrictions coming for work permits after students graduate. That includes tying 3-year permits to higher levels of study and requirements for French or English language proficiency. Plus, there are new limits on work permits for spouses of both workers and students.
Earlier this month, Immigration Minister Marc Miller announced another set of changes related to temporary foreign workers and international students living in Canada. And a lot of popular creators made a video about it, that how it is possibly the worst news for Indian immigrants living in Canada and for international students. In my opinion, it is not a bad news, it is a good news that's come a little too late, not just for international students but also for the Indian immigrant community at large living in Canada. Let's explore why. But before we begin the video, in case you haven't subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We have been making videos on this channel for about 2 years, and by you subscribing to our channel, it would help a lot in our endeavors going forward. And while it can come as a shocking news to many, personally to me, it isn't shocking at all. If you were following this news and if you were aware about the number of temporary workers in Canada and the number of PR quota that they have, this would not be a shocking news to you. I follow this popular YouTube creator and also immigration consultant called Kubeir. So on his channel, he has been talking about how the temporary workers in Canada far exceed the number of people that Canada can absorb as permanent residents, and people would have to go back eventually. So I'm sharing a clip that Kubeir talked on his channel more than a year ago, where he talked about the number of temporary residents in Canada and how many of them would have to go back.
It shows that out of this huge number, 40 million, huge for Canada, 2.1 million are temporary residents in Canada. Now, 2.1 million temporary residents, you will say that's not a big deal, but hey, it is a big deal. That 1.5 million are workers. So workers could be open work permit holders or of course closed work permit holders. This is a big number, 1.5 million people. I'm still not counting the international students, which as the data suggests, for this year, they have approved nearly 900,000 applications. Can you imagine the number of people that are there in Canada now with the temporary resident status? And of course, most of you would like to make Canada your home. You want to be in Canada as a permanent resident, you want to live here permanently. So what is the number we're looking at? Nearly 2.2 million people as of right now and growing. Where is the immigration quotas? Where are the PR quotas? For each year, the number of people who will become permanent residents is roughly 500,000. For this year, definitely we'll see a number of 500,000. Even year on year, as the number increases, it doesn't increase to match this huge number of approximately 2.2 million temporary residents. Where are all these people going to go? I've been saying this for such a long time that PR is becoming difficult, that the number of temporary residents in Canada does not balance out with the PR quota. But people said that I was fear-mongering. I'm not indulging in fear-mongering. I was only talking about data. I was talking about numbers. But obviously, a lot of people are still hooked up on the TR to PR. They are still hooked up on some extension of some policies. They're still hooked up on hoping and praying for CAC draws only so that they can see a draw of 75. Guys, it's not going to happen.
And in fact, this is not the first video where Kubeir talks about this. There have been many other instances. Even before I landed in Canada, I have seen many videos in 2022 talking about the high level of students and temporary workers in Canada. It's just that if people were not following this news, it would come as a shock to them. So before we understand why I'm calling this a good news, let's first understand what these changes were and how they would impact the temporary workers and students in Canada, but also the ones that are still in India and planning to come to Canada. So firstly, for all the students that are applying for a postgraduate work permit after they're done with the studies would again need to take an IELTS exam to prove that they can communicate in English or French, which are the two official languages of Canada. If they are passing out from a university, there is a minimum CLB 7 requirement, and if they're passing out from a college, there is a minimum CLB 5 requirement. The second big change is on spousal open work permit. It was announced earlier this year that all the students that are doing diploma or college program would not get spousal open work permit. Students studying in master's or PhD programs would be exempt for it. Now they've made an additional change, which is that if you're doing a master's program, it has to be for a minimum of 16 months for the student to get a spousal work permit for their spouse. That means that if you're coming to Canada for a 1-year master program, you would not be getting a spousal work permit. So they are further trying to cut down the number of temporary workers through these measures. Also, the issuance of PGWP when students are passing out from a public college is specifically linked to those education areas where there is an actual labor shortage in Canada. So it would be very skill based and dependent on the Canadian economy requirements that the government will take a call on which PGWPs to offer in the near future. Also, another big news that came out recently was that all the PGWPs that were expiring in 2024 will not be extended further. So all these students that have their PGWPs expiring and they're not eligible yet for either a PNP or an express entry application based on points would have to go back. In essence, all these changes would mean that the number of students that Canada would approve the student permit for in the next 2 years is being reduced by 10%. So all these are measures to ensure that they limit the number of students that they are intaking into Canada because of the high level of unemployment that is already there in the economy. So now that you have a basic understanding of what these changes were, let me talk about why they were required in the first place. So the first reason is the rapid increase of population and no infrastructure to support it. So Canada now is one of the fastest growing countries in the world when it comes to population, and that's driven by temporary workers and permanent residents that came in Canada in the last few years, especially during COVID when there was a labor shortage and many citizens and PRs in Canada could not go out to work due to COVID. They welcomed a lot of students to support the jobs that were not being filled. But now that we are in a post-COVID era, many of these people are now being considered surplus because Canadian citizens and PRs and the youth can fill their jobs, but because there is such a big pool of temporary workers available already, there is a high unemployment and inflation on account of that. This brings me to the second reason, which is youth unemployment. Canadian youth look at food delivery service and restaurants as one of the first jobs that they do after they pass out from their college, but now they're not able to get those jobs because there is a big amount of temporary workers that have come to Canada and there is a lot of competition, and the youth unemployment is now at its highest rate there has ever been. So this is causing a lot of frustration among the Canadian citizens, which they are expressing to the government as well as through the media channels, that because of immigrants we are not able to find the jobs, and that's why the unemployment rate is increasing. The third reason that they had to do this was the various scams that are going on with regards to LMIAs. I've made a separate video on it, that how pervasive the LMIA scam in Canada is and has become. And also there is a parallel economy which is being created, which is of cash jobs. So most of the students, once they fulfill their maximum hours, start working on cash jobs, which leads to exploitation of labor. And also they are being paid less than minimum wage because employers are able to find labor at a less than minimum wage job. They are not incentivized to increase the pay. That is why it affects all the other workers that are especially looking for formal jobs. The fourth and the big reason is the elections that are due early next year. The current government realizes that immigration levels have increased beyond anybody's expectation, and they're doing a lot of steps right now to ensure that they cater to their vote banks and are able to say that they have done a lot of work when it comes to the anti-immigration sentiment that is going on right now in Canada. So these are the big 4 reasons that I think the government is taking these steps. If you think I've missed out on any reason, please mention it in the comments. It would be really interesting to see what you guys think about it. So now that you understand what the changes are and what were some of the reasons that the government had to do it, let me talk about why I think this is a good news for all Indians living in Canada. The first reason is that they're not closing doors to students coming to Canada at all, right? They are not saying that we will not welcome any student going forward. All they are saying is that we will look at the level of students coming in, both from a quantity as well as from a quality standpoint. If you are living in Canada, you're expected to speak in English or French. So by putting a criteria to take an IELTS exam again would ultimately help students and the economy. Like if you're not able to speak fluent English, then it would be really difficult for you to survive here. Also, this way only those students that can contribute to the Canadian economy in a meaningful way. Many of the jobs that Indian students are doing here with regards to delivering of food or driving of Ubers, there are already Canadian youth that is unemployed, and they would look for them them to take up these jobs. So that's why international students who are in Canada or will continue to come, they would have to demonstrate that they have that quality and the necessary skill set to contribute to the economy. The second reason that I think it is a good news is that temporary foreign worker program was being sold by immigration consultants, colleges, and to some extent by the government as well, as it being a pathway to permanent residency. Many students were under the impression that once you are an international student in Canada, you would somehow become a permanent resident. But that is not the case, and through these measures, the government is giving a very strong message that if you're planning to come to Canada as a student, it is not certain that you will get a PR. If you can contribute to the economy and if there is a requirement, only then you will become a PR or a citizen ultimately, but not otherwise. By sending this message, it helps not only the students that are studying in Canada so that they can start taking their studies and their future more seriously, it also positively sends a message to all the students back in India or other countries who are looking to Canada as a potential destination. All the students that are watching it from India would, after this news, be more cautious of coming to Canadian colleges and paying 3 times or 4 times the fees and then end up struggling here. So the third reason that I think it's a good news is that all the scams that are ongoing right now with regards to LMIAs or contract marriage or cash jobs, by announcing these changes, some of the scams will also come to a rest, and all these bad agents would not be able to exploit students in the name of issuance of PR or an LMIA. I think paying $300 to take an IELTS exam is much better than paying $20,000 to $30,000 illegally for getting an LMIA. So hopefully all these measures would put a stop to some of the scams that are ongoing with regards to the Canadian immigration system. And the fourth reason that I think is that by announcing these measures, the Canadian government is sending a very strong and clear message to all the temporary workers. By not extending the work permit, they are telling the students to think about their future today rather than thinking about and figuring it after 2 years. So there is a common expression called ripping the bandage. That means that if you put a band-aid on your skin and if you try to take it out slowly, it will hurt more. But the better way is to rip it off in an instant so that the pain is less and you also know where you stand. So by announcing no extensions of work permit right now, students would take that as a sad news today, but it would save them another year or two of struggle and then getting the same news that they are not able to qualify for Canadian PR 2 years later. So by doing this step today, many students would be able to save 1 or 2 years of struggle and exploitation, and possibly they can think of a future either in Canada if it's possible for them, or go back to the home country and think about building their future there. And the last reason why I think this is a good news is that there is an increasing sentiment of anti-immigration towards Indians and many citizens who are of Indian origin. So by taking these measures, the government is ensuring that only the right quantity and quality of Indian immigrants continue to live in Canada, which would positively impact the image of everybody who is of an Indian origin. Indian immigrants contribute to the Canadian economy in various ways. There are a lot of software engineers, businessmen, doctors, nurses, part of the Canadian economy, but there is a specific and small population of Canadians that are making a lot of noise online that Indians only deliver food and drive Ubers in Canada. But that is not the scenario, and by ensuring that the creme de la creme of Indian immigrants stay back, we will be able to rebuild some of the negative reputation impact that the Indian immigrant community has taken in Canada. So these were some of the reasons why I think these measures are the best news for Indian immigrants and also international students. I only think that these measures have been announced a little too late and all of a sudden. If the government would have taken this step maybe 6 to 10 months down the line and given students more time to react to the situation, that would have been a better approach in my opinion. But now that the steps have been taken, ultimately in the long run it will ensure that many students who are currently being exploited in the system are not exploited, and they can build a better and secure future for themselves, whether be it in Canada or in India. So that is the end of the video. In case you liked it, please press the subscribe button and press the bell icon so that you are made aware of any future video that we release. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to write in the comment section. We will see you until next time. Take care and goodbye.